Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. I'm a big fan of, there are many writers, but I will always be a fan of Peter Drucker, and he says, thinking is a dangerous pastime. So therefore, very often, as we get into very complex debates, we tend to forget what a gentleman called Peter Senge says when he looks at system thinking. He would say that small changes produce great results. However, the points of greatest leverage are the least visible. Well, if Sherlock Holmes is there, he would say, buddy, we didn't need Peter Senge to say that because it's a flash of the obvious. It's always been there. Why the hell have I not seen it? As I've sat down and listened to the various conversations, it's been very interesting. It has reminded me of meetings I do with my directors and general managers in the room. They all get so moved by the problem. They all get so involved in the emotion of the problem that very often they remind me of a saying that somebody said, we are lost, but what the heck, we're making good time. So I just want to reset the context of the conversation, if I may. The world is changing. We can talk about the changes, but what is important in this room is not to worry about what are the business opportunities we have from this change. I don't think it's to worry about how many thousands of people would get displaced, though they are very important elements. I think this conclave and this room is wanting to think about the relevance of leadership when man's history is going to be rewritten again in what's called 4.0. That's the context of this conclave as I have understood it. We can go into the McKinsey global reports, we can reel off numbers, we can talk about how many people will get displaced versus per capitas, we can talk about deep learning, we can talk about predictive analytics, and I come from data company and I breathe and eat data day in and day out. That's not the context of what I want to spend my time sharing with you. I want to talk about, do we have the leaders that can handle the pending tidal wave of tomorrow? That's the question. And as I was preparing, I happened to chance upon an article that is published in a very respected journal. I won't tell it to you now. And I extracted a paragraph from that article and that essay, and I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to ask you to guess for me the dateline of that article. That's all I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to ask you, when do you think this article was written? Please love me. Technology has advanced more rapidly in the past 50 years than in the previous 5,000. Relying on the atom's almost limitless energy, the computer's almost limitless intellect, the futurists predict an era of almost limitless change. With remarkable confidence and in considerable detail, they present a view of man not only in total control of his environment, but his own brain and his own evolution. In automated industry, not only manual workers, but also secretaries and most middle-level managers would have been replaced by computers. The remaining executives will be responsible for major decisions and long-range planning. Please humor me by helping me to date this article. 1980, the future shock. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Let's get a date from each row. This date said 1970, that's done. What does this row think? Must be the third wave of Alvin Toffler. That's possible. What about that side? That's H1 Toffler future shock. So let's get ready for a future shock. This is an article that's published in the Times magazine, the issue of February 1966, titled The Futurist Looking at 2000. You may want to go read at it because they got most things right. Why did I read that? I read it for two reasons. One, let's not excite ourselves that we've discovered something new. Number two, to remind us that we have no further evolved since the days of Henry Ford as human beings, because when the lawyer of Henry Ford went to the president of the Michigan's First Savings Bank and asked him whether he should invest in the Ford Motor Company, he got some classic advice. He was told, don't invest. Motor cars are just a passing phase. Horses are here to stay. The question I want to challenge the educators and the practitioners of management in this hall is, if he knew about this in 1966, sorry for the French, what the hell were we doing all this time? Second, we know about it today, and it's no longer a futurist prediction. It's happening as we speak. My wife just got rid of the maid who sweeps our home. There's a beautiful robo that does it, and I have no problems in my life. In fact, I called the boy who cleans my cars and showed him the robo. I said, Bud, shape up, because your job's going to go soon. And he started cleaning my cars better. That's good for him. I want to therefore recenter ourselves to say that we've got to face what's really coming. I'm not going to spend my time talking about the big data and the analytics, though we can read off numbers that would dazzle our minds. I want to talk about what is the impact of that. That's important because that in turn will tell us what changes, that in turn tell us what kind of leaders we need to create, and that in turn will tell us what we should do to create learning for our people. Whichever way you look at it, you can look at all the analytics, and when you synthesize the problem, there are only three outcomes that are going to happen. Three. Outcome number one, some jobs will cease to be. These guys who stare at screens waiting for alerts to come, they don't have jobs. The guys who are doing data collection, they don't have jobs. The guys who do data processing, they don't have jobs. So some jobs are going to go. You can debate till the cows come home whether the 6% or 7.3 or 8.4, that's not the purpose. Some jobs are going to cease to be. As the learned Ed just said, that's what's happening in Hyundai. It ceases to be. 6%, give or take a few percentage points here or there. The second outcome that's going to happen is there are going to be elements of my job that are going to cease to be. And people peg that at 30% for 60% of the jobs. I will no longer use spreadsheets. Those are my favorite pastime as a group vice president. I impress people the speed of my Excel. I'm sure many of you do that. It's called Excel for a reason. You can excel at it. That's the second thing that's going to come. So some of our jobs, we're not going to have enough to occupy our time. Studies say that only 39% of our time is spent in the core job we are hired to do. The rest is to enable it. And if you think about the frightening outcome, it means 60% of what I'm doing today, if it got automated and was useless, or productivity is improved, I've only got work for 40%, which means people would say on the gig economy, you don't have a full-time job, but you've got a part-time job. Think about it. Outcome number three is a very interesting outcome. There are going to be jobs where new elements of work are going to be added, like the surgeon who now has to handle a robotic. Or I could talk to my dentist friends and I tell them, Bud, do you know how your job has changed? He said, how? He said, you were in the business of pulling out teeth, buddy. Today in the business of putting it back. Think about it. Today a dentist needs to understand material science. Only three outcomes. And whichever of these three outcomes you look at, there's one common distilled factor. And that is, the guy who's lost his job has got to learn a new one. The guy who lost the elements in job has got to learn new elements. And the guy who's had elements added to his job has got to learn those new elements. So if you look at the common word across, the simple problem that we're talking about when you take all the romanticism out of this lovely story is a simple word called learning. And therefore, the key question to ask ourselves in the environment of MBA education outside the environment is, are we equipped to enable learning? And that's the question. Question B is, we got to make a paradigm. The paradigm actually starts from the root. We talk of schooling today. Perhaps many of us in this room know, maybe some don't. But the root of the word school comes from a Greek word called skole, which means leisure. Which means people who went to school just to have a good time. So if you're teachers that are castigating your children for enjoying themselves, you're wrong. That's what the Greeks wanted it to be. Have a good time, go to school. But that's not true. Learning is serious business. It's a matter of survival for us. The second paradigm comes from our own culture of the Hindu mythology, the Hindu thinking, the Vedic thinking, which said life is about 4 parts, starting from brahmacharya to sannyasa, and therefore it suggested that there's a finite time for learning, and after that you don't have to learn anymore. And what did we say today? The world is changing. It's about being lifelong learners. So now, having distilled the problem to saying the problem is about learning, I want to talk to you about 3 C's and challenge your thoughts as educators, as HR professionals, as fellow managers, as thought influencers. The first C talks about a word called content. Today, when you look at the business education that we have, we teach the disciplines of management in finite pillars and verticals: financial management, marketing, HR, etc. When the gentle poor lady, the pretty girl, and the lovely guy go out of the business schools into the corporate world, they realize it's not pillars anymore. It's a complex interaction of these. In fact, it's about system thinking, which is a complex paradox. Think about a few, if I may throw it at you. It is all about be global, think local. How the hell? Sounds great. Compete, but collaborate. My God, how the hell do you do that? Make your numbers happen, but keep an eye on your people. You must be ready to change, but we need order in the system. How do you manage these paradoxes? Is our learning equipping our people to manage these paradoxes? Like a story I love to tell, there's a friend of mine, and actually my boss. His nephew came to him having finished a course in filmmaking, and he's asked him, "Uncle, what do I do?" And he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" "I want to be in the business of filmmaking." He said, "Buddy, you're going to have no job left in a few years' time." This guy was shocked. He's from Premier Institute, filmmaking, no job. Absolutely, you will have no job in a few years' time because movie making as a concept may not exist. There may be no such thing called movies. So what do you do? He said, "I've got hope for you, son. You better learn storytelling. Because storytelling is timeless. There will always be a story to tell, as I always say that. There will always be an audience to listen to a story like you are. And there will always be a need of a person like me to tell the story." One of the most successful businesses in the world is Disney, and that's because he defined his business well. He didn't define his business as theme parks. He'd have been out of business. He didn't define his business as movie making. He'd have been out of business. He defined his business as, "I'm in the business of making people happy." He's got a business for a lifetime. What do you and I teach our people, both at work and in the business schools? Are we teaching them movie making? Are we teaching them storytelling? The first C, content. The second C is what I talk about as culture. If you look at this entire thing of artificial intelligence, robotics, deep learning, predictive analytics. There's no shortage. Natural language processing. There's no shortage of any of these. I hear this morning tonight. Somebody other than my team wants to tell me of something new. They've taken a vow to make my life complex. If you take all that away, one of the things that comes is that the work at the lower end of the spectrum is going away. The work is at the more higher end of the spectrum, and it does not require hard work because we're only going to be occupied for 40% of the time. It requires smart work. So some of you heard this theory of mine. For those who haven't, I love to do it, and I hope to publish this across India because I think it's very important. It comes from the physics equation. Momentum is equal to mass into velocity. We're supposed to create momentum. You talk to Shikawat, he'll say, my brand has momentum. You talk to Mr. Modi, he says, India's on the move. We got momentum. And you talk to Newton, he'll say, why are you screaming, guys? That was my first law. That a body continues to be in a state of rest or continued motion unless acted upon by an external force. And so, it leads ourselves to three cultures. I asked children, I was in business school, and asked them, how many variables are there in this equation? Momentum equals mass into velocity. And they all said 2. I said, you are just like the CEOs. When I used to be in consulting, I used to ask the same question, and senior guys in boards used to make the same mistake. Actually, there are 3 variables. There's a multiplication sign in between, which people forget. That's a variable too. It leads to 3 cultures. The first culture is Asian, which is where most of the jobs are going to go away. We're driven by mass. Our children don't study, we tell them, study harder, man. The guy doesn't finish his work at 6, we tell him to work till 10. We can't do it in 1 shift, we do 2 shifts. We can't do it we did in 3. We wish there were 8 days in a week. And when you look back, our kids have grown up and they've gone away. We are a momentum culture. You look at the work we do, it's only driven by mass. Like Drucker says, time has a way of changing assets into liabilities. Our asset is the number of people we have. Our liability is we use that as an excuse for a lack of efficiency. We are dead in the water. Mass cultures, all of them. India, China, I've lived in Korea, I've lived in other parts of Asia. Most of Asia is built like this. You know why? It's because we are blessed with population. I mean, you work in a sweet shop, what do you eat for a basic diet? Sweets, of course. Why not? No, you shouldn't. And then comes the second culture. I used to live in Denmark for a few years. And I asked my boss, hey, boss, you got a choice to make. I got a gun to your head. Choose between your wife and your vacation. You know what he said? What did he say? He said vacation. Because that's the first thing he plans at the beginning of the year. He works for 9 months. He doesn't work after 6. He never disturbed me on a Saturday or a Sunday. He taught me how to work. And guess what? They have a higher per capita. They have more patents. They are more thought leaders. They achieve better. They speak better. And everything else. We work harder. We are mass cultures. We are primed to fail in the new economy. And then there was an American who said, jokers, you all forgot the multiplication in between. So he created Silicon Valley and the Carolinas in order to get his velocity, and he created the H-1B to create his mass. What if India, if we could change the culture of our work, teach people to work more efficiently, and then we'd have mass into velocity and we'll dominate the world. Are you going to teach business school, are you going to teach your kids to work hard or to work smart? Are you going to remind them what Drucker talked about when he said efficiency and effectiveness? Does our curriculum enable that? Or do we tell them, do your assignments at 12:30 in the night, buddy? No. We're just preparing them to fail. And the last one. Last C is the one that worries me the most. I'll call it context. If there's a gentleman called Shubhra, what was his name? ISB. Shumanta Ghoshal, if he had been here, he would have said, it's less about people, it's more about context. You know what? We lack the role models in our environment for our people to progress. I don't have the time, so I won't spend time on it. Today, you go ask a youngster, who do you like to be like? And he say, I don't know who I'd like to be like, but I can look at a list of all the people I don't want to be like. And I think that is another big problem in a changing world. End by saying, you know what? take all these problems. This is a huge management problem. And if Peter Drucker was here, this is what he would have told you. He would have told you, I've said this all my life, management is so much more than exercising rank and privilege. Management is more than just making deals. Management touches people and touches lives. I hope we keep that in mind as we think of 4.0. Thank you.